NC Pork, good for the plate, great for the state. Day 2 of the 2025 Atlantic Coast Conference Tournament in Charlotte is in the books. And David Glenn and myself, Mike Waddell, are here with you, the only people still taping in the Spectrum Center in downtown Charlotte are David Glenn and the ACC Network crew. And DG, this has been quite a two-day start to the tournament. Some games very well attended, like Carolina's earlier today, their win over Notre Dame that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then there were the night games, which it looked like that was kind of one of those old MCI friends and family affairs down in uptown Charlotte.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. And here we are. All we have left are the top 8 seeds. So it's been very chalky so far, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because the best teams are still standing. And as the calendar is about to turn to Thursday for these next 3 days, I think we'll see a higher caliber of basketball because it is the 8 teams, the 8 best teams still standing.
This is my 25th ACC tournament to attend or cover. How many have you seen?
So this will be started in 1988, so that would make it, and I haven't missed any. I was even there the COVID year when they started the tournament and then stopped it. So what would that be? Is that 38? I think that's 38 in a row where I've seen at least part of it as a member of the media or otherwise. So, yeah, that dates back to, for the record, to my undergrad days. I'm not that old, but 38 straight ACC tournaments. And whereas there's not quite as much hype about this one as many I've been to, I still think we have a lot of fun waiting for us, Mike. I mean, it might not all be on Thursday, but there are several really good teams here and a couple more fighting for their postseason lives. And that's why I believe we've got some fun drama waiting for us over these next 3 days.
I think you're right. We're blessed to have the North Carolina Pork Council as our foundational partner here on the North Carolina Sports Network. They bring us all of our bacon and basketball coverage here in the month of March. So we're excited to get right to it. Let's start with a little Ripley's Believe It or Not, or we'll modify it a little bit and call it DG's Believe It or Not Facts on the 2025 ACC Tournament. DG, what's your Believe It or Not fact number 1?
Well, number 1, Mike, because it's been chalky here, and because we are the North Carolina Sports Network, and once again, the event is right here in our backyard, the Queen City of Charlotte, I just wanted to remind folks that this event is 72 years old, and as crazy as this number sounds, the 4 North Carolina schools collectively, Duke has the most, Carolina the second most, NC State the third most, and Wake Forest is tied for the 4th most ACC titles. So I'm not saying what's going to happen the rest of this week, this year, but would you believe that of the 70 tournaments that were completed, the Big 4 schools have won 55 of those? So we're not far from 80%, and this is now an 18-school league, but those 4 schools known as the Big 4, especially way back in the day, are responsible for almost 80% of those championships. And I'll give you a couple other Believe It or Nots real quick because I know you want to get to today's games and tomorrow's previews. Everybody knows by now that Clemson is the only original member of the ACC that has never won the ACC men's basketball tournament. What you might not know are 2 other things. All the other original members, including Maryland and South Carolina, which aren't even in the league anymore, they all won their first tournament in either the 50s when the league was created, the 60s, or the 70s. So it's not like there was even another school that waited more than 20 or so years. And Clemson is now in year 72, still seeking its first title. And the Tigers have only been to 2 ACC title games in the previous 71 years. You don't hear that fact as often, but that's the challenge for Brad Brownell and his very talented team, which, has a chance to make history here in Charlotte. And finally, a lot of fans will not like to hear this, and one fan base will love to hear it. I was just doing this research, and I knew it was true in a general sense, but I had forgotten the exact numbers. In the last 25 ACC tournaments that have been completed, Duke has won 13, and the rest of the world combined has won 12. So that is the most dominant run over, in that case, a quarter century or so in the history of this 72-year-old event. So there's one for the state of North Carolina, one for the Clemson Tigers just across the border, and one for those Duke Blue Devils, who not only won all those under Coach K, obviously, but now even John Shire won one of his first two, and now he's trying to make it 2 out of 3 this year.
John Shire certainly has a team to beat, but Duke's history, I mean, going back to Vic Bubas and Bill Foster and some guy named Krzyzewski from Chicago, they've had a pretty good run in the ACC tournament. We'll see tomorrow with their first action coming up against Georgia Tech, how they will fare in 2025. We'll talk about tomorrow's games a little bit later on. But right now, let's go back through today's 4 games. And this was really 2 ACC games and then 2 games that didn't really fit when you talk about Stanford and Cal, and then the game just finished between Syracuse and SMU. We'll get to those in a little bit, but let's start at the top of the day. It was Georgia Tech and Virginia going at it. This one of the closer games of the day in the Queen City, and Georgia Tech just too much for Ron Sanchez and his Virginia Cavaliers, 66-60. Georgia Tech with the win. Anything surprise you in this one, David?
Not so much. Probably the biggest news is that Virginia can now start its coaching search, right? I mean, whoever won this game was going to have to deal with Duke tomorrow, and you can't possibly like the Yellow Jackets' chances in that one. We'll talk about it. But UVA is a national championship program thanks to Tony Bennett. And they've won a whole bunch of regular season titles and a couple of ACC tournament titles during Tony Bennett's era. Obviously, he's been gone since prior to the season, but Ron Sanchez posted a 15-17 record. He is a longtime Tony Bennett assistant, former head coach of the Charlotte 49ers, but he is not going to get that job. So UVA's coaching search can now officially ramp up, just as NC State's coaching search continues, and just as Florida State and Miami have filled their vacancies, and some fan bases are waiting to see if other ACC head coaches' heads are going to roll. But the Yellow Jackets beat the Cavaliers mainly because they just had more weapons. Duncan Powell was one of the best sixth men in this league this year. He started for Georgia Tech today and had 21 points. Bay Ndongo is the Yellow Jackets' really good big man, 16 points, 10 rebounds, 4 blocked shots. And their point guard, not an offensive dynamo, but a really good assist man. Nate George had 13 points and 8 assists. So that trifecta was more than enough for Georgia Tech to send the Virginia Cavaliers home.
And so Georgia Tech gets the lucky ticket to go up against the Duke Blue Devils tomorrow at noon. Duke beat Georgia Tech in Atlanta 82-56 in late December. Do you think much has changed in that matchup that is keeping the Blue Devil assistant coaching staff now minus Jay Lucas up all night tonight, or do you think they're going to be sleeping pretty well in their Charlotte beds?
I think they're sleeping well right now as you and I are recording this. The bottom line is this, Duke is number 1 in the nation for a lot of really good reasons. Georgia Tech, I'll give them credit for this under Damon Stoudemire. They're a really stingy defensive team. And out of that kind of, soft midsection of the ACC this year, I think they deserve a lot of credit for just playing hard and playing well on defense. But they don't have enough weapons to deal with Duke. That's the bottom line. Duke, even against a good defense, just has too many weapons. And really, after Ndongo down low, Duncan Powell, and the point guard Nate George, they do have a guy named Lance Terry at Georgia Tech who, if you give him space, can absolutely tear you up with 3-pointers. But, of course, Duke's smart defensively. They're not going to give Lance Terry space. They know what the Yellow Jackets like to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the kind of dominating victory that we saw Duke put on Georgia Tech in Atlanta way back. I think that was in December.
Our second game of the day, David and I were sitting behind the Notre Dame bench. We got a chance to hear Micah Shrewsbury coach up the Irish. Unfortunately, he didn't have anything that was an answer for the magic that is three-point shooting excellence. Jalen Withers, 7 of 10 for Jalen Withers, the former Louisville player, now Tar Heel. Carolina led by as many as 24. They came out strong. Then Alan Lubin, a double-double, 17 points, 10 boards. He was plus 28 in the plus-minus whenever he was on the court for the Tar Heels as they got out very quickly on the Fighting Irish and really never looked back. That was a welcome opportunity for the Tar Heels to go deep into the bench and maybe get a little bit of confidence going into that matchup with Big Four foe Wake Forest tomorrow afternoon at 2:30.
Yeah, Carolina's last 6 wins, Mike, counting over Notre Dame here on Wednesday, have been by an average of 20 points. And we all know that all 6 of those wins have been against teams, in the bottom half of the ACC standings. But that's a dominant level of victory that the Tar Heels were not capable of earlier this season. Hubert Davis has talked a lot over the past couple of weeks about guys finding and accepting and embracing their roles.
Right.
And the reality is, Jalen Withers is a 6'9" guy that at least this season, one of the things he does well is catch and shoot. And you usually think of a catch and shoot guy as maybe a 6'4" guard. Well, Jalen Withers, yes, he's a good athlete. Yes, he can dunk, and they ask him to defend and rebound, etc. But you really don't want Jalen handling the ball. You really don't want him trying to put a spin move on somebody. You don't want him to try to dribble past somebody. He's a 6'9" guy that now he has his confidence in his stroke back, which he didn't have last year. Mike, Jalen Withers made 4 3-pointers in the entirety of last season, 4 for the year. He made 7 today, which was the most of any Carolina player in any single ACC tournament game ever. So 21 points, 9 rebounds, as you said, 7 for 10 from three-point land. That's as good as Jalen Withers gets. He doesn't have to be that way all the time, obviously, and you wouldn't expect that. But if he does all those other things consistently, and then on a night where he's feeling it, he tears it up, that's exactly what they need. But Drake Powell didn't have huge numbers, but he played incredible defense on Marcus Burton, who led the ACC in scoring. Burton's a 5'11" guard for Notre Dame, and Drake Powell's a 6'6" or so guy with long arms. And Marcus Burton, instead of having 22 efficient points, had 11 points on 3 of 11 shooting. And I'm not sure any of those field goals came when Drake Powell was guarding him. So that's another weapon for Hubert Davis. Powell some nights is good offensively. All nights he's going to be really good defensively. And it's foul trouble limited Drake's minutes today. But if I'm Hubert Davis, I want that guy on the floor for 30-plus minutes per game. Meanwhile, R.J. Davis has continued his better shooting. Remember, for much of the season, he was under 30% from three-point land. That's a guy who was a first-team All-American last year. His number is still only hovering maybe, close to 34%, something like that. But if you look at his more recent series of games, he is closer to that 40% that Carolina fans came to expect from R.J. Davis from beyond the arc. He hit 3 out of 6. That's another great sign. R.J. Davis didn't feel the need to take all the shots tonight, and he didn't. I don't think he took any really poor off-balance shots. You mentioned Van Allen Lubin. On his best nights, double-double, 17 points and 10 rebounds. He has great hands. He's gritty. It's almost like he has suction cups for fingers sometimes on the boards or when he's catching a pass in the post. And some of the other Carolina big guys have the slippery fingers syndrome that doesn't work so well. And speaking of accepting your role, Elliot Cadeau is at his best for the Tar Heels when he's deferring to all the talent around him. Not just Lubin and Withers and RJ, but Ian Jackson's a good three-point shooter on many nights. Elliot Cadeau should not shoot a lot, even at this stage of his career, end of his second year as a starter. He took only 2 shots, I believe, in this whole game.
He was really cool.
But he had 10 assists and only 2 turnovers. So if he can limit his shots and limit his turnovers and be that floor general and distributor, as Hubert Davis said after the game, when he keeps his passing mindset to the simple stuff, he is one of the best distributors in all of college basketball, and I think that's right. But we all know he's prone to some ugly shooting nights. He's prone to some ugly turnover nights. If Carolina is going to get where it wants to go, Hubert Davis needs to see more of this theme where guys are accepting their role one by one, playing confidently within that role, but not really trying to go out and do something that's not there. I'd say that Seth Trimble is the only guy who looked a little lost today. He played hard, but he did not play well. He bricked all 4 of his shots, no assists, a couple of turnovers. He even got beat on defense a handful of times, and he's such a sensational athlete and often a great defender. He just doesn't look confident or comfortable right now. So maybe the Tar Heels need him to kind of be one more puzzle piece that falls into place, but infinitely more good than bad for Carolina in that 20-point victory over the Irish.
Next up for Carolina will be a 2:30 matchup against Wake Forest. The Tar Heels and the Deacs only played one this past season. That was in Winston-Salem, a 67-66 win for the Deacs. As I went back and looked at this one, man, Elliot Cadeau had a big game. R.J. Davis had a big game. What Carolina did not have was trips to the free throw line. They didn't shoot even 10 free throws in that game. And Wake Forest almost had 26, 27 free throws, if I remember correctly. So this game right here seems to be one that Carolina needs to get their tempo going, and they also need to be penetrating and being able to draw some fouls to get to the line to get some of those easy buckets, because Wake Forest is stepping the level up. They're the 4th seed in this tournament for a reason. They are a pretty good ball club. And this a de facto, David? Do you think a de facto elimination game from somebody who may be on the bubble right now for that field of 68 come Sunday night?
Yeah, I know there's some bracketologists who just today, Mike, elevated Carolina into the last 4 in category. Joe Lenardi of ESPN among those. I would discourage Carolina fans from getting too optimistic about that because I do believe that if Carolina loses to Wake Forest, it's sending the message to the committee, no, the Tar Heels do not belong. And the same applies to Wake Forest. We've been talking about it for weeks now. Wake has only one victory over a team we know would receive an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. That's Michigan. Carolina has only one victory over a team we know would receive an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. That's UCLA. Historically, that's just not enough to get you in. And one thing to remember if you're clinging to Joe Lenardi's last 4 in is that other teams are still playing. So if the Heels lose to Wake and some of these other bubble teams post valuable victories, well, then the Heels fall back out. I believe it is a de facto elimination game. Obviously, the loser is eliminated literally from, the ACC tournament, but I think it's essentially 2 layers of an elimination game. If you lose, you're going home from the tournament, but if you lose, you're just not going to get serious consideration from the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. I thought that game in Winston-Salem that you just outlined could have gone either way. Obviously, a 1-point differential. But what I thought happened was, Carolina got next to nothing from its big men, and that's part of not going to the free throw line. That whole crew of Jalen Withers, Van Allen Lubin, Jalen Washington, they did next to nothing and asked Elliot Cadeau and R.J. Davis to carry the freight in that game and just didn't have enough. I thought the 2 MVPs of that Wake victory were Cameron Hildreth, who had a team-high 20 points. Steve Forbes always compliments Hildreth, and understandably so. I believe he called him either the toughest or as tough as any player that he has ever coached, which is a massive compliment. And Hildreth in that game just kept attacking the basket. You mentioned the free throw differential. Part of it was because Hildreth kept getting to the line over and over and over on the way to those team-high 20 points. And the other MVP, the co-MVP, if you will, for the Deacs in that close game was the App State transfer, Trayvon Spillers. He had, 12 points. Excuse me, I'm fighting through. I'm on the injured reserve list, Mike. 12 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 blocked shots. So Spillers was part of the reason that Carolina's big men were not very productive. But at the same time, Wake didn't move the ball well in that game. Wake's biggest problem, as we've talked about for months, is lack of a quality point guard. And they didn't move the ball very well. They did not get a lot of high percentage shots. They needed to live on the line, and they did enough to win. But I don't know if Tyler Johnson, their point guard, is ready for this task. Elliot Cadeau dominated the point guard matchup, even in defeat, as Wake edged Carolina in Winston-Salem. But Wake was tougher on the board, so it's up to Van Allen Lubin and some combination of Jalen Washington, Jalen Withers. The Carolina can't lose that big man battle as severely as it did in Winston-Salem. I think the Tar Heels are the better team right now, the more confident team right now. I think Carolina will win, but as the first matchup showed, certainly the Deacons are capable of beating the Tar Heels.
We'll let you get a drink of water right here, David, as we remind people that they're tuned in to what is our de facto ACC Tournament morning show here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Mike Waddell, joined by David Glenn, covering his 38th ACC Tournament. I'm covering my 25th, but I took a long time off when I was off doing college athletics in the Big Ten and the SEC and a few other leagues. But I tell you, there's something special about this ACC Tournament. There's also something special about this time of year, and still to come as we tag out this show, coming after we talk about the other two games here from the evening session on Wednesday. We're going to go into the coaching searches of North Carolina State and the University of Virginia. But before we do that, David, let's go back to our two games in the evening session at the Spectrum Center. Stanford over Cal in a Pac-10 Classic, 78-73. SMU over Syracuse, 73-53. The Cardinal swept all three games against their arch rival Cal this season, and for the first time, they're playing in the Eastern time zone against one another. And lo and behold, right here in Popcorns, Peanuts, in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, and actually it was a pretty good game, and some guys really showed out, I thought, on both sides. Mike, you saw Andre Stojakovic, the Cal guard, and he's the son of the former NBA player Petra Stojakovic. Andre not only had 37 points, which is the most of any player in any ACC tournament for more than a decade. So we saw truly something special. It was in defeat in Stojakovic's case. He's actually a former Stanford Cardinal who, when they had a coaching change after last season, he jumped across the rivalry to the Cal Bears. He not only had 37 points, he was 13 of 22 from the field. He made 4 of his 7 3-pointers and 7 of his 8 free throws. So that's not just a selfish gunner. That's a highly efficient 37 points. Former Western Carolina star DJ Campbell, who now is a guard for the Cal Bears, had 19 points and 10 rebounds from his guard position. So Cal had two guys who were just sensational. They just didn't get enough help. And the reality is that Stanford had two sensational guys, and they got more help. Maxime Reynaud, with a big guy, 7-footer from Paris, France. He had almost a double-double, 23 points and 8 rebounds. He also blocked a shot, had a couple steals, had a couple of assists. He's just one of those wonderful European multi-dimensional players. He was great again, first team All-ACC. And then Jalen Blakes, who I voted for the most improved player in the entire ACC. He didn't win. I think he might have finished second in the voting. But Jalen Blakes, former Duke point guard, of course, didn't play much for the Blue Devils for 3 years and then just had a breakout senior season for the Cardinal. He had 21 points tonight, 6 assists, only 1 turnover, 3 steals. Blakes has always been a good defender, even during his off-the-bench minutes with the Blue Devils. But the difference in the game was, whereas Cal's 2 stars didn't get much support offensively, Stanford's 2 stars did. And they have a backup named Chisholm Okpara, came off the bench for 12 points. Benny Jeeler is their backup point guard. He made 2 big 3-pointers, had 3 nice assists. So it's Stanford moving on. Again, all these teams that we're mentioning in the lower half of the bracket are going to be significant underdogs. But it's the Stanford Cardinal that gets a shot at the Louisville Cardinals, as all the lesser teams have gone home, man. And whereas we all have favorites in the Thursday 4 matchups, I don't think it's safe to say that, other than maybe Georgia Tech upsetting Duke, all 3 of the other favorites are at least in some jeopardy. The favored team is going to have to play well to win.
Ought to be a lot of fun to watch those games tomorrow. And then we have the games going on off the court right now. And Boo Corrigan at North Carolina State and Carla Williams up at the grounds at the University of Virginia are both looking for head basketball coaches right now. Carla Williams been at this for a while. She knew back in December probably that she was not going to have Ryan Sanchez on the grounds after this interim season, following Tony's big-time surprise announcement that he was going away. Coach Bennett no longer coaching and doesn't seem to be very much missing the sidelines these days. Very happy in Charlottesville and his role there at the university. So these two ADs are out there trying to get the next guy that's going to come in here and trying to take it at Duke and the rest of the top teams in the league. What are you hearing around that NC State coaching search? A lot of people for sure chattering about that in Charlotte.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to remind folks, and you're the longtime AD, so you know this even better than I. It's not as easy in real life to hire a high quality head coach as a lot of the social media warriors suggest that it is. There are just some real world complications. For example, many of the top coaches on your wish list are not available to talk right now. You might be able to talk to their agent, you might be able to go through back channels, but if they're in the midst of their conference tournament right now, they're not taking your phone call while they're trying to win their next game. There will be a time for that. And NC State's search started a little bit before Virginia's search did. So maybe the Wolfpack got a head start in that regard. But another thing that happens that fans don't like to think about or even admit is that sometimes your school is not a coach's first choice. And that coach or his agent or both want to see what other jobs come open before they say yes to you. Now, I've known ADs that are willing to wait for their favorite candidate if they have to wait. To maybe the job that this candidate was their favorite didn't come open, and then they say yes to you. I've known other ADs who say, well, if you're putting us second on your list, we're not interested in you. Oh, yeah. But again, that's easier to do on message boards and social media than it is to do in real life. You know, the Indiana job is open, but will the Texas job come open? I mean, as you and I speak, I'm not even sure. Is the Iowa job going to come open in the Big Ten? Is the Villanova job going to come open in the Big East? I don't have all those answers right now, but some of the targets of UVA and NC State may be interested in some of those openings. I think Ryan Odom of VCU, son of great friend of our program, Dave Odom. He's the former successful UMBC head coach who, remember, he was the first number 16 seed to beat the 1 seed. That came at the expense of the UVA Cavaliers. Now Ryan Odom is a candidate for the UVA opening, but I think the Wolfpack is interested in Ryan Odom as well. Very successful now in his second year at VCU, successful at Utah State prior to that, successful at UMBC prior to that. Will Wade, of course, is the name that Wolfpack fans keep bringing up. McNeese State head coach, very successful at LSU, successful at VCU, but LSU is still recovering from the NCAA sanctions that resulted from Will Wade's many level 1 NCAA violations. It is easier for fans to say no big deal when a coach has a checkered past. It is less easy for a university president or chancellor or sometimes an athletic director to say no big deal. You know, Boo Corrigan, the Wolfpack athletic director, is the son of the late Gene Corrigan, who was a universally celebrated man of intellect and integrity. And I don't think Gene Corrigan would have been interested in hiring Will Wade. That doesn't mean that Boo Corrigan won't, but it is a hurdle that is bigger than many fans think it is when a guy got a show cause penalty, lied to the NCAA repeatedly, you know, paid his players' girlfriends to lie about his paying of players. Like, these aren't small things. And sometimes fans say, well, it's all legal now. Actually, it's not. That's another thing where the social media warriors think they speak confidently when they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. That's a daily occurrence in our country. It is still not under the old system, not under the current system, not under the soon-to-be system. It's still not permissible for a coach to reach into his pocket or direct money into the pockets of his players. Collectives can do that, and starting next year, universities can pay players NIL money directly, assuming that House settlement goes through. But under the old system, the current system, and the future system, coaches still are not paying players or their girlfriends out of their back pocket. Not allowed then, not allowed now, not allowed in the future. So that argument is bogus. It's just simply not true. I think Richard Pitino of New Mexico is another hot commodity. He did not succeed at Minnesota, remember, but he has had success these last 4 years at New Mexico, including last year's NCAA tournament and this year's NCAA tournament. Right. And, of course, the former Wolfpack point guard, Justin Gainey, some people believe that he's ready for a head coaching job. He's been the right-hand man to Rick Barnes. He actually has the associate head coach title at Tennessee as we speak. He's worked under Sean Miller at Arizona. He's worked under that Herb Sendek guy at Santa Clara, worked under Steve Wojciechowski at Marquette. Justin Gainey is going to be a head coach someday, and I know some in Wolfpack Nation just think so fondly of him, as I do. He's a product of our state from the high school ranks, played, of course, with distinction for the Wolfpack, and now he's an assistant coach of distinction. Question is, would you really pay an $8 million almost dollar buyout to hire an assistant coach? Maybe, maybe not. That I'd keep my eyes on those names. A Ben McCollum of Drake is going to be on the radar, I think, of UVA and probably others. He's in his first season there, but he's won 30 games. And as a Division II head coach, he won 4 national championships. So not everybody wants to take a chance on a guy who's only been at the Division I level for 1 season. But Ben McCollum's got some swagger. His teams play at a very slow pace, but he's a really confident guy. And you can't argue with 30 wins in his first year at Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference. Colorado State coach named Nico Medved, formerly at Furman. He may enter the picture on one of these. The current former Furman coach, Bob Ritchie, has been a consistent winner there with the Paladins, although only 1 NCAA tournament bid in a 1-bid league. Top 3 in the Southern Conference, I think 6 times in the last 8 years. So is he on the UVA radar? All these things are still, taking clarity, even in the eyes of the athletic directors themselves, I would imagine. And meanwhile, while State and Virginia are hoping to fill their vacancies at some point soon, the Indiana job is open, and our good friend Brad Brownell of Clemson just had to answer questions about whether he'd leave the Tigers to go back to his home state of Indiana and be the new leader of the Hoosiers, which historically, obviously, is a pretty prestigious basketball job.
One guy that I worked with is also going to be on the move this year if he has anything to do with it, and that's UCLA head coach Mick Cronin. I know he is dying to get back to the Midwest, and Indiana is a job that he covets. One of the more humorous things that I heard today on Media Row in Charlotte, we were sitting behind the lower seed bench, was there was a little cobble of media folk that were talking about how they thought Shaka Smart was going to be on the move. Well, I'll tell you, I worked for Shaka Smart for 3 years. I consider him a close friend. And if Shaka Smart leaves Marquette for a school that plays football, it'll be something that is a massive 180-degree turn from the last time he and I spoke. He is loving life in Milwaukee right now. It's a home area for him. He went to school at Kenyon in Ohio, but he is from the Wisconsin area. He is excited to be back there, and he loves being at a school that doesn't play football. So, David, we have a full day tomorrow, starting off at high noon. Duke and Georgia Tech. It'll be North Carolina and Wake Forest for the second time this year, coming up at 2:30. Then at 7 o'clock, the evening session has Louisville, Stanford, and then Clemson comes in as the drawing the day to a close on day 3 of the 2025 ACC tournament when they play the SMU Mustangs. It should be a lot of fun. It's our Bacon and Basketball Month, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council. And David, it's great to be here at the ACC tournament. I came back to the home office to record tonight. Tomorrow we'll be recording there from the Spectrum Center together as we do the ACC's only tournament morning show. So it's like I'm Al Roker and you can be Bryant Gumbel.
That's a deal, my friend. I'm headed home myself right now.
All right, we'll see you. We'll leave the light on for you out on the front porch. For David Glenn, I'm Mike Waddell. We'll talk to you tomorrow live from downtown Charlotte as it is ACC Tournament Day 3, brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council on the North Carolina Sports Network.
The moment we waited for, everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the gas, ain't no slowing down. Aiming for greatness, no settling. Kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Taking no else, yeah, I gotta win. Watch me kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Who running the game now? Foot on the gas, can slow down. No, my team, we holding it down. We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change, yeah.